Morning, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and this is your weekly forecast for the week of June 24th through June the 30th. Welcome to Cancer sun season. Sun's just ingressed into Cancer on Friday, and getting some of the summer season kicked off underway. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the Sun in Cancer and the first decan in particular, and the important ingresses of this week. We have one in particular with Mercury moving into Leo. And then we're going to take a little bit of a tour of the moon through the cycle and see what kind of things the moon's going to be touching on this week, and discuss a little bit about the phases of the moon and what to expect, and the energetic principles behind some of the different, like DANE RUDHYAR type phases of the moon. It's by no means new through him, but he did a great job of explaining it. And then, people like Dimitri George were expanding on that in their more modern work. So let's get to it. First of all, I just want to show you the tarot card that's associated with Cancer and the first decan, which is the first 10-degree section of the sign. Talk a little bit about Cancer here. Cancer is a cardinal or tropical sign, which means that it is the first sign in the season. It is initiating the new summer energy. We just experienced the solstice on Friday, where the day was the longest and the night was the shortest. And now the sun begins its descent in the sky, and the days start to get a little bit shorter in length. And we've reached sort of a peak in the cycle. We've come over the top of the mountain, and now we're descending over the other side. Doesn't mean we know exactly where we're going, but it's sort of like a bit of a full moon type of experience for the year. And we just got through this, fairly difficult period where we had Mars and Mercury opposing both Saturn and Pluto over the last couple of weeks, and that's been some rough energy. I'm sure that there's been some challenges that you all have come to face. Maybe there was a few brick walls that you had to pool your resources to spill around gently. There may have been a few things that said no in your life where you wanted something and it didn't quite work out the way that you were planning. And hopefully we're getting somewhat past some of the roadblocks. We are heading towards some pretty important new and full moon eclipses in the beginning of July next week. But this will be kind of the lead up to that new chapter marker. And with the sun in Cancer, the pace is probably, it's a little bit of a different pace. The sun in general represents according to the ancient authors, the light of the intellect, the soul, the divine mind, the will. Its nature is to build. And we are kind of experiencing wherever the sun is where we're going to have a conscious intention or set of intentions. So this week we are experiencing Cancer 1, which is represented by the Two of Cups. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the astrological associations and the tarot cards, each of the suits has an element associated with it, and the cups is associated with water. The wands is fire, swords is air, and the pentacles are associated with the earth signs. So here we have the first decan of the cardinal water sign of Cancer, and we're seeing two figures exchanging cups. It is a union of sorts. This card was called Love, according to the book of Thoth or the book T. And one of the things that Cancer represents is the union of the body and the soul. So we have these kind of dual energies on the Cancer and Capricorn axis, where we have kind of the soul's descent into matter with Cancer, and the soul's escape from matter, or the atrophy of the body and the release during Capricorn time. So we're going to see that energy coming up over the summer, where we're going to be, things are growing. You can see it if you're in the northern hemisphere, like I am. Things are starting to grow, blossom, and bloom. All the animals have reproduced, and babies are being formed and hatched, and then there's a nurturing quality that comes in with that, where the things that we have birthed, we need to take care of, and we need to put energy into, bringing to adulthood or to full fruition. And one of the themes of the last couple of weeks was what types of things are you going to nurture, and how many of your seed ideas are worth putting your energy into, and which ones had to be released. So hopefully you've had some clarity with that over the last week, and figured out what is worth putting your energy into, and what needed to be released, so that you had the right resources to move forward with the projects that are near and dear to your heart. The sad fact of the matter is that not every baby makes it, or not every physical baby in nature makes it. Not every idea that we have, and every creative child that we have makes it. I know that on my walks around the neighborhood recently, I've seen a number of baby animals that maybe were run over by a car or attacked by a predator. I think over the course of the week, I saw a dead baby raccoon, a dead baby squirrel, and then a flicker, a type of woodpecker that had been taken by a hawk in our neighborhood. The interesting thing is that we found out it was a flicker because we looked at the feathers, and then saw another baby flicker that had survived in our backyard. And that was really interesting to see that, the one that made it and the one that didn't. I thought it was a really interesting representation from nature of the energy that we've been going through. And the woodpecker in general represents rhythms in your life, and new rhythms coming into your life. So some of these new rhythms may have been, nurtured, and others may have been taken by the hawks of Saturn or Pluto in your life. And I would say that the key to understanding that and dealing with that in a graceful manner is to realize that this is part of a unified whole. The experience that you're going through is part of something that is a greater cycle, that this may be one event in. I've been listening to some educational lectures about Hellenistic astrology, and one of the points that is being made over and over again is that when we look at transits and progressions and perfections and zodiacal releasing, they are part of a greater biography of your life. And this may just be one chapter or one stage or one phase. And it's important to kind of see what chapter you're in and get some awareness and clarity with that, but not to get fixated on it as the be all end all and the only energy that you're going to be experiencing, because we're constantly moving through the story and we're in the middle of it. And sometimes we don't know what type of story we're crafting until we actually hit the mile marker, or hit the fruition, or have the completion of that energy, and then can reflect on it. So that's something that is a theme of Cancer in particular, is that reflection energy, being able to kind of examine some things in our life. Like Cancer, of course, is ruled by the moon, and the moon is the reflected light of the sun. And it does have a quote unquote reflective quality to it, where you are able to kind of think about the things in your life and feel them, and be able to, instead of just intellectualizing them, feeling them on a very gut level, and kind of seeing how that fits into the greater scheme and picture of your life. This week in particular, we are going to be kind of at the end of a moon cycle. You know, we've had the full moon, and we are moving towards the waning cycle of the moon, where the moon is releasing its light. So if we start our little journey on our tour of the moon cycle this week, you can see my screen here. Here it is, Monday, June 24th at 6 a.m. And we are said to be in what is called a disseminating phase. So we can see, and I'm going to annotate this here, that the distance, the arc of distance between the moon and the sun is now, for disseminating phase, is 135 to 90 degrees behind the sun. So you can see that in front of the sun, we have this area down here, and then we come to the full moon, kind of opposition over here, and then here, this area is behind the sun, okay? So the disseminating phase was compared by Dane RUDHYAR and then later Demetra George in her book Astrology and the Authentic Self to the fruit phase, where you had the flowering phase at the full moon. The disseminating phase was when the fruit became ripened, and we are seeing the results of our actions that we initiated at the new moon seed phase. And so this is about harvesting the crop. This is about distributing what you've learned over this cycle and seeing what has come to fruition. So today, well, maybe not today, but on Monday, we are going to have the moon moving through the sign of Pisces, the last decan of Pisces here. And we're just separating from a sextile with Pluto earlier in the day. And the next aspect we're going to have is a trine with Mars in Cancer. So there may be some kind of, you may feel a nice boost of energy or emotional energy where there's a harmonious conversation. Trines were said to be the nature of Jupiter, the greater benefic. So there may be a nice burst of emotional energy that you get over the course of the day. We are seeing a trine after that, a few hours later, with Mercury. Okay, here we go. We can see the trine with Mercury happening. And that may be a similar boost, but this time to the ability to communicate, to the intellect, to maybe any commercial endeavors that you have going, since Mercury was associated with commerce and with merchants. So there may be some kind of trigger that happens with that. Remember, the moon is a trigger mechanism. It was associated with forms that come into being and pass away. It was associated with the concept of tuke, which is fortune. So a lot of the times the moon is triggering events out in our life that we can see in the visible world of form. And it may not be necessarily through our own actions, although it may be the result of actions that we took in the past, and those things are finally coming into form. But the difference between that and the sun is the sun was associated with what was called daimon, or spirit, and that's more about the will and about the actions that we take. So we're going to see the moon triggering different planetary aspects throughout the week, and the overarching will or theme that we're going to be experiencing is that of the Cancer sun, or the nurturing aspect. So we're going to see it move through Pisces on Monday, and the moon is going to move into the sign of Aries later in the day. Okay, right around noon or so, we see that now we've got the moon in Aries here, and that's going to set off a little bit of a T-square energy between Saturn, Pluto, Mercury, Mars, the sun, and the moon in Aries. So we've still got the signs of Capricorn and Cancer hosting Saturn and Pluto respectively, and then Mercury, Mars, and now the sun. And those planetary teams or deities that are hanging out in these domiciles here are kind of facing off with one another, and the moon is now coming into a square, or what is said to be the nature of Mars. So there's a little bit of friction that may come up on late Monday going into Tuesday. Now the sun has set off this kind of, in the middle of this T-squared energy here as well. As we move into the moon in Aries, we have two conditions that we're looking for here. Let me move it forward a little bit. Okay, so there we go. So first of all, we have a mutual reception that is happening between the moon in Aries, whoa, and then Mars in Cancer. So mutual reception is something where the planets are hanging out in each other's temples or each other's domiciles, and thus they have an open line of communication to one another that allows them to use the resources of the other. So it's usually a harmonious or beneficial relationship. Now, the challenge that we have here is that the moon and Mars, while being in each other's domiciles, they are squared to one another. So this is kind of like you're staying in your buddy's house, but it's not necessarily friendly, and maybe you're on poor terms with your friend, and they're kind of pissed that you're staying in their house, and you're kind of pissed that they're staying in your house, and the conversation may not be as productive as it could be if there was a more beneficial aspect like a trine or a sextile. So there's a little bit of a negotiation that may have to come up, or a tension between the moon and Mars on the first couple days of the week, even though that they are engaged in a conversation. And eventually that difficulty may end up benefiting you in your life. But it's going to be when the moon moves into Aries, there may be some more subjective concerns that come up. Instead of the more magnanimous Jupiterian Pisces moon, we have this Mars-ruled Aryan moon, where we're kind of, our own desires are bubbling up to the surface, and we're saying, well, hey, wait a minute, what about me and what I want? And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. You just have to be careful and watch out for it, that it doesn't cause unnecessary conflict. Sometimes there's necessary conflict, and it's good to kind of air things out, but try not to get too heated up in the first couple days of the week here. The other thing that's going to do is it's going to start we're going to be seeing a conjunction with Chiron. So the moon is going to conjoin Chiron at 5 degrees Aries, which may bring up the Chiron was associated with the wounded healer, some kind of wound that you may have that gets triggered. Chiron was a really interesting figure. I think if we just call him the wounded healer, we may not be doing him justice. He was also a great teacher and a great healer. He had a knowledge of plant medicine and was someone who trained people in the, the Hermetic arts, you could call it. And so we may see themes come up related to that as well, like teaching and learning. But in the chart, in a modern context, Chiron was associated with a wound that you may be able to help others with, but that you have difficulty dealing with yourself. So it's like you're giving this energy to somebody else, and you're teaching them about this particular issue, but you have difficulty manifesting it for yourself. And that's going to move into, as we move past that particular conjunction, we are going to see the moon. The next aspect we make here is an applying square with the sun. Okay, so there we see the moon's coming into square with the sun. Now this kicks off and starts to trigger a new phase of the moon. All right, and we can see that this distance that we have between the moon and the sun now is roughly between 90 and 45 degrees. At this point, it's exactly 90 degrees, which is the square, okay? But this phase is called the last quarter. And I'll put that as LQ, okay? And the last quarter phase of the moon cycle, according to Mr. DANE RUDHYAR and Demetra George and other authors, was a point of crisis. It was a point of reevaluation. The fruit had fallen off the vine and the stalk of the plant has started to wither. And we may be turning away from the original goal that we had at the new moon and searching for a new, a new type of goal or a new type of direction. And it may be very different than the old one. And the thing that comes up with this, the word that always sticks out in my mind for last quarter moon phase is an existential crisis. You may have a crisis of faith or of purpose or philosophy, and you may reverse course. I happen to have a last quarter moon phase by birth, and I can tell you that almost every day is a new existential crisis. I do a lot of evaluating. I do a lot of reflecting, and I really think about what all of my actions mean within the greater context of my life and other people's lives. And that can be a good thing. It can also be a little bit debilitating at times because instead of taking a lot of forward action, my personal modus operandi is to overthink things before actually taking the action. And that can be challenging. So that might be one of the things that is cropping up on a more universal level in the first couple of days of the week is we may have trouble moving forward because really the part of the cycle that we're in here is releasing and reevaluating some of the assumptions that we may have made in the beginning of the last cycle. And we're moving towards the next phase, which is called the balsamic phase, which is the consolidation of a seed for planting for the next new moon. And this is a big new moon that we are going to be planting in the beginning of July. In fact, it is a new moon solar eclipse, which is said to be a supercharged new moon and a chapter marker. So it's not just a monthly refresh. It is a 6-month refresh, or even within a greater, longer term cycle. I believe that the cycles happen every couple decades here, where they have a new moon eclipse in a similar degree of the zodiac. So this could be a big new moon in a particular area or house or topic of your chart. So one of the things to really examine over the next week as you are preparing for that gigantic new start is looking at the area of your chart, in particular where Cancer is present, and seeing what the topics are associated with that particular area of your chart, and evaluate the last few months, the last few years, maybe the last few decades, and see if you're going to be able to make a new start and what kind of goals that you would have. This is a great week to kind of look back and reflect on your life and do a little bit of a life evaluation. For those of you who are into archangels and ascended masters, I believe the archangel associated with a life review was Jeremiel. I don't know if I'm saying that properly. I know it was the J one. And there's a particular archangel, and you can look this up. I think it was Jeremiel, where he was responsible for helping you do a life review, generally at death, but you can call upon that particular archangel to do a mini life review while you're still alive. And that can be useful to help you guide the light ahead to where you may want to go in the future. So that is one of the things that I would recommend this month, or this week in particular. So as we move through Tuesday, let me get rid of this here. We are going to be seeing, as we move past the conjunction with Chiron, the next aspect we're going to see is, and the square with the sun, is a nice applying trine to Jupiter on Tuesday, moving into Wednesday. Okay, so that's going to perfect on Wednesday, moving around the wheel here. Here we go. So it's perfecting around 9 a.m. or so on Wednesday morning. And that's going to be a very nice aspect. Anytime the moon is making an applying aspect with a benefic, such as Jupiter or Venus, we generally have pleasant feelings, especially when it's a nice aspect like the trine or the sextile. So maybe expect some good news or something nice to manifest in your life. This is a time of optimism and of hope. Maybe you're planning your vacation. Maybe you're planning a family get-together or some kind of social event where you may be able to get together with people who you consider your kin or your tribe or your family. That's one of the themes of Cancer, is there is a little bit of a kinship that happens in the sign of Cancer. And on the flip side, on the negative side, it could be a clannishism or a type of selection of only wanting what is familiar. But in general, the moon is associated with inclusion. And with the sun being in the temple of the moon, we may, want to include more people that may not necessarily just be within our small circle. And that may be a good impulse, is to reach out to some of the people in your life that you may not think that they are part of your group, but you can bring them in. Everybody can be part of the family at this time, I think. And the moon applying to a trine with Jupiter is a great time to reach out and start to facilitate some of those relationships. As we move forward from the trine with Jupiter, almost immediately, I'm laughing because it's like, man, don't we get to enjoy that nice little aspect for a while? Almost immediately, we see that we're going to have a square with Saturn. So here we can see this square aspect between the moon and Saturn, which is of the nature of Mars. And that is a severing, heating quality. Okay. So it's like maybe you invited everybody to the party, or then you have second thoughts and you're like, I don't want to invite that guy. Like maybe it's like, yeah, don't invite Uncle Joe. He always like stirs some junk up, and he's probably gonna show up half in the bag or something, and you may reevaluate the guest list a little bit, and that's fine. Sometimes we have to be a little bit selective as to who we bring into our spheres. I just got done telling you should reach out to more people, and that's good advice, but there may be some circumstances where it does bring more difficulty into your life than is necessary when you're dealing with people that are going to bring you challenge. So there may be some kind of challenge that comes up after we move past that nice aspect with Jupiter. The good news is it's temporary. It's going to move fairly quickly. If I move forward here, this is always what's nice about moon transits, is they move so quickly that, if you're experiencing it, it may trigger an event, but you just kind of have to wait, and then the next thing happens. The next thing that we're experiencing on Wednesday here is a nice little sextile between the moon and Venus at 21 degrees of Aries and Gemini. So, potentially you run into a little bumpy patch, and then you start to harmonize it with Venus towards the end of the day. Maybe you've worked it out, you've gotten over the hump with the challenge, and peace has been restored. As we move forward through the evening, we're going to see a square with Pluto, which could bring up some things from the underworld, so to speak, or from the volcanic depths of your soul or of your subconscious or your psyche. might not always be the most pleasant kind of thing, but maybe there's something that needs to be dealt with that you will resolve, and then you can move forward into this beautiful Taurus moon towards the end of the week. So the good news is that the moon and Mars are going to have mutual reception with one another. So if something is coming up that is, sticky, hairy, if there's a family issue that you're needing to deal with, if there's some kind of disagreement about how to properly nurture somebody or something in your life, you can have a conversation now. There may be some points where it may get a little heated, but I think that ultimately there's going to be some kind of productive conversation that comes out of some of the more challenging stuff that we're going through. Now, we still have Mars in Cancer. Mars is still debilitated for the week here, which means that it is in its fall and it's not really functioning at its best. So there may be some residual effects of this kind of passive aggressiveness, this energy where we're, going behind the scenes and there's a little bit of conflict in the family unit, whatever that means to you, the groups that you are a part of, the people that you share, maybe a community or some sort of shared sense of roots with. And the good news with that is we've got about a week left of that, and then Mars is going to move signs too. The other thing that's going on Wednesday is Mercury is going to be shifting signs from Cancer into Leo. So if I show you the card associated with the first decan of Leo, we have the 5 of Wands. And of course, the Wands are indicative of the fire signs and the element of fire and action. So we have a more active Mercury now as the winged messenger moves into Leo. And the 5 of Wands was called strife. And Austin Coppock in his book 36 Faces calls it the spotlight, or the first decan of Leo, the spotlight. So it's kind of, we've got these young folks that are contending with one another in a sort of mock battle. They are competing for either the spotlight or competing for some kind of recognition, some kind of solar activity. Maybe it's shining their particular identity or light out there, or vying for some kind of authority. So there may be some contesting, some destabilizing where in matters related to authority, in matters related to shining your sense of purpose out in the world. And there may be a more of an ego identification with your communications. We're moving out of the sign of Cancer, where we were, there were these pregnant pauses and silences where we expected people to read our minds, and we, Mercury was hanging out in the temple of the moon, and now he's shifted into the temple of the sun, where he's getting a little bit, more able to express a personal desire, potentially a display of intellect, a need to prove what you know. And you got to be careful because, if you're constantly throwing things out there, you may be proving what you know, but you may also be proving what you don't know. If you get too fired up about it and start to display your ignorance. So you have to be careful of that too. Try not to get too attached to your own subjective viewpoint with this particular condition. There can be some pride that people get when they get too attached to their ideas and to their own, their own path when it comes to what they've studied and what their knowledge base is and things like that. We see this pretty often on social media and Facebook, and especially in the astrological community. There's lots of debates about which system to use for this and for that. And if you've studied a lot, you may feel a little bit of pride that swells up because you've put the hours in and you put the years in, and that system may really work for you, and you have a lot of experiential knowledge. And then when somebody challenges it with something that they may have put an equal amount of energy into, or perhaps not. That's where we start to take offense if we think that someone hasn't put the same amount of effort that we have into. Then that's when conflicts can start to arise. And I would caution you against that this week, and recognize that there's many different parts of the elephant that we're touching here. To quote a story where many wise men were describing an elephant, one described it like a tree trunk when he was touching the legs. One was describing it like a snake when it was touching the trunk, and maybe somebody else was touching the tusk or the tail. And ultimately, I think that without oversimplifying, many of our systematic ways that we go through things help us get to somewhat of a similar destination. That's not always the case. There are definitely some instances where a specific knowledge set can really make a difference in the outcome. But I would say that one of the good things to remember this week is to try to respect other people's processes, and remember that someone else's light does not necessarily have to diminish your own. I think that there's room for a diversity of opinions and a diversity of systems, and you can shine yours without having to shade out somebody else's. Now, that may happen naturally. There may be some of us whose fire burns a little brighter than others, and that's okay. We're naturally going to cast a shadow. Like the way that the sun works is it shines so brightly that its light can make other stars in the sky seem to disappear. That's not actually what's happening. They still exist, but they're under the beams of the sun. So try not to take too much of a personal affront if, your light gets eclipsed every once in a while, or if when you're shining your light, you get either a little bit of pushback, or if you have to agree to disagree with somebody, that's okay too. That's one of my favorite phrases is, we'll just have to agree to disagree. And that's it's your own prerogative. It's going back to those 4 agreements. Don't take anything that other people say personally, because that's their own truth. All right, so moving forward with Mercury in Leo, that happens on 8:19 p.m. Eastern Time. Mercury is said to ingress into the sign of Leo. And immediately when Mercury ingresses, it's going to start to make a square with Uranus. So there is a square with Uranus. I don't know why I'm giggling at all this. I'm just giggling, imagining the conversations that are going to come up and the explosiveness and disruption that may happen when Mercury in Leo, a sign that could be very prideful, runs into the stubbornness of Taurus and the volatility of the planet Uranus. So there may be some heated debates that go on in the next few days here, and that's okay. They may be necessary to break up the crystallized patterns that things represented by the sign of Taurus may have gotten into. One of the roles of Uranus and Taurus is to break up the concretized, old, outdated patterns that we may be living in, the old narratives that we may have taken for granted within our lives. And Mercury is going to be stimulating that planet this week. It's going to be starting to have a conversation with that disruptive element. And I like to think of these things as we embracing these types of relationships and conversations, because a little bit of friction every once in a while is what makes the rubber meet the road and moves you forward. So a tire has tread on it and has friction with the road so that it can move it forward. If tires were completely devoid of any tread or friction, we wouldn't go anywhere. We'd just be spinning our wheels. So embrace some of the harder conversations that you have to have this week, and try to be humble if you can. Try not to get too attached to your own idea. Try to listen if you can and see the other person's point of view, even if it doesn't completely match up with yours. And that's going to be a good mode of operation in the next weeks ahead, especially as Mercury moves through Leo and it's square with Uranus and Taurus. Okay, so let's take a look here at the end of the week. So we've still got this, as I look at the sky here, so we move into Thursday. Let's see if I can get rid of this here. Boom. As we move into Thursday, we're going to have this early square from the moon in Aries to Mars in Cancer. I love it when those aspects happen while I'm sleeping. Like, maybe that's not the greatest for getting a restful, restorative sleep, but maybe I can just work out all the tension and the drama in my dream state rather than with all the people in my life. So that's going to happen really early in the morning, depending on where you live. So some of us may be working it out in our dreams, in our astral life, and others may have to really manifest it in the world of form. Oh man! So as we move forward into Thursday, the 27th, we are going to see this beautiful thing happening where the moon is going to be moving out of the temple of Mars and into the domicile of Venus. A sigh of relief. At 9:52 or 9:32 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the moon is going to enter her exaltation. So this is a form of dignity that is bestowed upon the moon when she is residing or visiting or traveling through the temple of Taurus or Venus, where she is honored. She is the honored guest in the house of Taurus. She has a nice receptivity with Venus, and they're friends, they're buddies. They're both of the night sect, which has a philosophy of creating diversity and change. Those are some of the philosophical core values of the night sect. So there's an agreement here. The moon becomes stabilized, like some of the things that may be coming into being, or there's a little bit of a slowing of the pace. There is, instead of an aggressive reaching out for what we want when Mars was in Aries, we have a kind of a relaxation where we're letting things more come to us with the moon in Taurus. I have this placement in my chart. I have the moon in Taurus in the 10th house, and it is a gift. It is a gift of being able to plant the seeds and then water them consistently. When the moon is in Taurus, figure out how you can nurture the things in your life. Get out and get some sunshine. Get your hands in the dirt. Get dirty. Water your plants, but don't water them too much. Like this is a thing that you'll learn when you have some prominent Taurus placements. You can overwater things, and if you don't take care of the plant wisely, this is what every gardener learns. Okay, you can drown a plant if you give it too much water. You can mess it up if you touch it too much. You can overplant your garden. One of the things I learned when I was a gardener, as a beginning gardener, I still grow some stuff. I've gone from planting vegetables and things like that to doing, I do bonsai trees now. I grow little miniature trees and trim them, and it really pleases my Taurus moon and all of my Virgo placements, because of course Virgo placements like miniature things and taking care of things that are small and perfecting them over time. And to do bonsai correctly, you have to be very patient because the trees grow for years, decades before they are able to be shaped properly. And you have to make the cut correctly, or you will lose years worth of growth. And that is quite a lesson in the cycles of time. You want to learn about the cycle of time and patience. Go grow some bonsai trees and get into that meditative practice. But one of the things you learn as a vegetable gardener is that you shouldn't overplant the garden. You plant things too close together, and they will crowd each other out, and none of them can do as well as they could if you were to plant things with better spacing. So those are some of the themes that we're going to see with the moon in Taurus. A little bit of generally a calming down of things. Now, there's a mitigating factor here when I talk about the calmness of the moon in Taurus. The two things. First of all, anytime we have the moon moving into Taurus, whether it's by new moon, full moon, or just passing moon cycles, for the next few years, it's going to be meeting up with Uranus, the disruptor. So normally this really nice, placid Taurus moon that we get, is going to be, it's normally going to be very relaxed and Venusian, but we've got this Uranian element now, this kind of shocking element that may be triggered every time the moon is going into Taurus. So kind of keep your eyes peeled for a trigger of some of the shakeups that you may be experiencing in the Taurus area of your chart. This aspect is also going to trigger a square with Mercury, so it may, trigger that kind of challenging energy between the pride of Mercury in Leo, and the disruptive quality of Uranus and Taurus. So watch out for that on Thursday. We're going to have a sextile between the moon and the sun as we move through the day. Now, for those of you who are astrologers, this is going to be the beginning of the Great Lakes Astrology Conference in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So it's, I think it's going to be a stimulating type of experience. For me personally, I'm going to be giving a lecture there. I'm going to be meeting all sorts of astrologers from all over the world. That may have something to do with the moon and Uranus here. And, I have a good feeling about, we might have some of those conversations where we're exchanging knowledge, but I think it's going to be a stimulating, productive, growth-orientated experience rather than something that maybe less disruptive. I think it's going to be fun. So this may be something to keep in mind. And the beautiful thing about this too is that not only is the moon in the sign of Taurus, as we have because the sun is now in the sign of Cancer, or the domicile of Cancer, the moon is really going to give us a type of relationship with wherever the moon is placed by sign as well. So we're going to have it's almost like a double whammy where we're going to really feel the changes of the moon doubly, because the moon is going to be providing for the sun. So our sense of identity may be wrapped up with where the moon is placed by sign as well. So we may feel a little bit more emotional. Our moods may change. Our identities may even seem to shift from every few days as the moon moves through its cycle. But there is a harmonious relationship between the moon and the sun as we move into Taurus here, and the sextile. See, we've got a sextile here between the moon and the sun. And the sextiles were said to be of the nature of Venus, based on the relationship between the planets in the thema mundi, or the nativity of the world. And you can check out past videos for some explanations on that. But in general, Venus was said to be 2 signs away from the lights in the chart of the world. So that's a harmonizing aspect. That is something that it's the lesser benefic, so it brings some nice things into our life. It brings a little bit of an ability to allow things to come to us rather than forcing things, and that's always a nice thing to experience. So that's Thursday. Now, as we move into Friday, we're going to have a shift of our moon phase here. So the next moon phase that we are going to experience is the last quarter moon. And the last quarter moon is anytime the distance between the moon and the sun. Sorry, I already talked about the last quarter. This is the balsamic moon phase. So the last quarter, of course, was when the moon was between 90 and 45 degrees behind the sun. And now we have this condition where the moon is less than 45 degrees behind the sun. Okay? And we're moving through that as we move into Saturday. Okay? Before we get to the balsamic phase, we're going to see a set of trines with the moon and Saturn, which may bring a little bit more of a serious tone to the conversation as we move into Friday afternoon. The conversation may be sober, but it may be productive. Sometimes we have here we go. Now we have a nice trine between the moon and Saturn at about 17 degrees, 18 degrees Taurus and Capricorn, the earth signs. So this may be a thing where you are having a productive Saturnian conversation where, you know, you may have come up with a bunch of new ideas. You may have planted some new seeds. You may have been relaxing, and now it's time to sober up a little bit and get a little bit serious and get to work and put the pedal to the metal and start to, you know, bring some structure into your life and the things that you've planted and the seeds that you have initiated. There's going to be a sextile also with the moon and Neptune. So there may be a little bit of a dreamy quality to that. There's going to be a little bit of a dichotomy between the seriousness and the sobriety of Saturn and the illusion and the rose-colored glasses type of signature of Neptune in Pisces. So it's a balance. It's like, how do you balance out the reality versus the illusion? And that's part of the conversation that you're going to be having at the end of the week here is what is real and what isn't, and what is worth consolidating into form, and what do we need to let go of as a dream that may not be in our best interest. So as we move forward through Saturday, we're going to see that balsamic moon happening early in the morning, around 3 a.m. Now we see the distance between the moon and the sun being roughly 45 degrees of arc. Okay, so this is when the moon is less than 45 degrees. Less than. Okay. And the balsamic moon phase is associated with the dark moon phase, the crone phase, where we've gone through the existential crisis. We have gone through the challenging philosophical questioning, and maybe we have made a choice about what our next move is going to be, and we're going to start consolidating all the wisdom that we gained at the beginning of the moon cycle and be able to plant it underneath the ground in the dark earth as a legacy for the next cycle of birth, fruition, and then death. So this is like the release phase. This is where you're kind of, you will be asked to let go of things. You'll be asked to clear the decks and get rid of everything that isn't serving you for the next next seed to be planted. The balsamic phase in Dimitra's book, Astrology and the Authentic Self, was talked about as leaving a legacy for the next generation. What did you learn over Gemini season? What did you learn at the Gemini new moon? What have you learned during the spring, the end of spring here? What did you learn over the Mars and Saturn opposition? What did you learn with the Mars and Pluto opposition? What needs to go so that you can make a brand new start in the Cancerian part of your life? How are you going to initiate that summer energy where you are bringing things into the flowering phase, into the fruit phase? How are you going to pollinate the flowers that you have come to recognition at the solstice, and then ripen the fruit and take care of the plant as you move over the hump of the year, so to speak, and into the phase where we are now disseminating the ideas that were, some of them that were initiated at the winter solstice last year, when the light began to increase. So this may be a good time to look back around the end of December, around December 20th to 21st, and see what types of things you were starting around that time of the year, and how successful were you? How many of those dreams, how many of those New Year's resolutions? That's really the time to set New Year's resolutions, is the beginning of Capricorn season. I think anybody who looks at astrological timing doesn't necessarily wait till the new year. They're making plans at the beginning of Capricorn season. So take a look back at that in your journals and see, what did you initiate? What kind of plans did you make? Are you getting the results that you hoped for? Do you need to make a shift in your life? And this is the time to make a shift. The Cancer is represented by the crab. And the crab moves with the tides. Sometimes they move forward, sometimes they move sideways, sometimes they move backwards. There may be a shift of direction that you need to take based on your evaluation and your reflection that you are looking back on the Capricorn period of time that we experienced in the last cycle. Take the time to self-reflect. I think that's always, this is coming, giggle again, because this is coming from a Cancer sun with a Taurus moon, and it's one of my favorite activities, is reflecting on things. So, but it can be fruitful, especially at this time of the year when the sun is in Cancer and the moon is in Taurus. It may be a really productive time that will allow you to plant the right types of seeds for the next cycle. So that'll be Saturday when the balsamic moon starts. And in the evening, we're going to see a movement of the moon into Gemini. And there may be a little bit more of a communicative, frenetic pace that happens in the evening on Saturday. It might be a more social moon. Saturday night might be a time to get together with groups of people and have stimulating discourse and conversations. There'll be a nice sextile with Mercury in Leo. We've got the beginnings of an applying opposition with Jupiter. Generally, contact with benefics can be beneficial. We've got the moon starting to apply to a conjunction with Venus. So the moon is sitting at the table with Venus now. So I have a feeling that this weekend, June 29th, June 28th, maybe a pretty pleasant, maybe pretty social. We're going to see there's going to be a little bit of a square to Neptune that's going to be happening throughout the weekend as well. So don't overdo it. If you're having a social event, be conscious of your limits, right? Saturn's going to remind you of your limits. Neptune is not. Neptune is going to try to dissolve all of your boundaries and limits and potentially encourage you to go off the deep end into a fantasy world. So just be a little aware of that and careful with that as we move through Sunday here. And yeah, that's pretty much taken us to the end of the week. Now, just looking ahead a little bit, we're really preparing for the set of eclipses that are happening on July the 2nd, the new moon solar eclipse in the sign of Cancer at about 10 degrees Cancer, and then the full moon lunar eclipse on July the 16th that happens, I believe, roughly around 23 to 24 degrees. Let's look for sure here. Let's look ahead. Bing, bang, boom. So there we go. We've got the July 2nd new moon eclipse that's happening at 10 degrees. And then we have on the 16th, the full moon that's happening, yes, roughly about 24 degrees on the axis of Cancer and Capricorn. So big changes are coming. And this is a great time to just get your ducks in a row before the next chapter begins. There'll be a transitionary period between the new moon solar eclipse and the full moon lunar eclipse where there may be new impulses coming in and the old tide may be going out around that time. Maybe a little sticky around that week because we've still got all these, Saturn and Pluto and now Venus will be joining the story here as we move into those eclipses. I think this week's going to be fairly kind of a little bit of maybe a calm before the storm type of experience. So take advantage of it. Do some reflection. Let go of the things that aren't serving you. Reevaluate your plans and goals so that you can really make a new, fresh start when the eclipse energy comes along. And, enjoy some good times with family and friends. And, exchange some ideas, not too forcefully. Be a good listener as well as somebody who is sharing their own ideas. And I think you'll have a pretty good week. That's about what I've got for the week here. For all those of you who are astrologers, the Great Lakes Astrology Conference is happening from June 27th this week to July 1st. I'll be giving a talk on, I think Saturday morning, Friday morning, I don't remember. One of those days, I'll be doing a lecture. I'm going to be talking about how to share things as an astrologer on social media and how to get your ducks in a row with that and how to, be more productive with video and with blogging and with, Instagram and how to get, automate some of these processes. So if you're in the Midwest or even if you're not and you want to take a trip, it's going to be fun. We've got a number of wonderful astrologers. My mentor, Adam Elmbas, is going to be there. Gemini Brett, Gary Caton, Samuel Reynolds, Ann Ortley, Armand Diaz, Ronnie Dreyer. I could go on and on. The list goes on. It's going to be a pretty fun time, I think. So if you're in the neighborhood and you're still on the fence, come and join us. It'll be fun. We'll get to hang out. You'll get to see some of your favorite astrologers in person. And I think it's going to be a good one. So that's what I've got for today. Try to take care of yourselves and the people you love. And remember to practice good self-care and get outside a little bit, soak up some sun, get your hands in the dirt, sit at the beach or wherever you find is relaxing for you. And I hope you have a good week. Everybody, take care. Bye-bye.